I am so sorry for the pain that you have carried for so many years. What was done to you was unjust, unfair, racist, and wrong.
Say it again.
To every Black resident, I am sorry not only for the abuse our city enacted, but for the beliefs and the bias that brought them to bear in the first place.
The butt of every joke was the stupidity of the black man, the inability of the black man to look after himself, never mind the country, to be ignorant, uneducated, break everything he touched. The messaging was that all violence was black violence, that all crime was black crime, that you had to fear black people. And a huge amount of that fear was that if we let them into the political process, into the governance of the country, that they would do to us exactly what we had done to them for decades.
On behalf of the Boston Police Department, the Mayor's Office, and the entire city of Boston, I want to say to Mr. Swanson and Mr. Bennett, the entire Bennett family, and Boston's entire Black community, I am so sorry for what you endured. I am so sorry for the pain that you have carried for so many years. What was done to you was unjust, unfair, racist, and wrong.
Say it again.
To every Black resident, I am sorry not only for the abuse our city enacted, but for the beliefs and the bias that brought them to bear in the first place. There is no world in which a piece of paper undoes the harm of this part of our history. But it is my hope, and the hope of our entire administration, that you might accept this letter of apology as a small step toward accountability for the damage done by our city.
So I grew up in apartheid South Africa as a English-speaking white boy. I only became politically conscious when I was already 18 years of age, because prior to that, I had been subjected to and sucked in this incredible propaganda of victimization of the white people, where every piece of news, every message we were getting, every joke, the butt of every joke was the stupidity of the black man, the inability of the black man to look after himself, never mind the country, to be ignorant, uneducated, break everything he touched. The messaging was that all violence was black violence, that all crime was black crime, that you had to fear black people. And a huge amount of that fear was that if we let them into the political process, into the governance of the country, that they would do to us exactly what we had done to them for decades, which would be to turn around and oppress us, to murder us, to take our stuff, to move into our houses. There was a very popular story that the ANC, prior to the 94 election, when it was still an illegal organization and Nelson Mandela was still in jail, and the armed wing was exiled to Zambia and Mozambique, Umkhonto we Sizwe, was that they promised all of our domestic servants that those servants would be given the house they worked in when the ANC ruled. And these stories were told amongst the whites to bolster our resolve never to let these black people run our country. And it was only when I became conscious of that from 18 onwards that I realized not only was this a terrible lie that was actually oppressing us as well as the people that we as a white nation, white minority, were oppressing, but that actually what happened subsequently from 1994 onwards was far more of a reflection of the nature of black South Africans than any fears we as white South Africans had been fed and believed, right? And I see direct parallels with what's happening in Palestine and Israel. We've been fed this bullshit of Israel as victim, of the Zionist government as defending, this idea that the entire Arab world wanted to wipe them off the map, when in fact, prior to the Nakba, prior to Palestine being given to Israel by the colonial powers, primarily Britain, many Jews lived very happily and harmoniously alongside Muslims and Christians within that region. They weren't oppressed there. They became the oppressor through the Zionist ambition of a few Israelis. White government for many, many years in South Africa needed the violence of Umkhonto we Sizwe. They needed the odd bomb to go off. They needed terror attacks because it justified the further repression. And I've told stories about when I was in the South African Defence Force in 1987-88, 88-89. The things that were done by the intelligence service to undermine the ANC and other liberation struggles, and to pit black against black, to distract black people from action against the oppressive minority and the history of oppression. And it's time to step aside from what we've been told and look at the truth, look at the reality, look at the history, educate ourselves, and make a moral judgment based on our real values as a human.
I've been asked probably well over 1,000 times in the comments and messages why I chose to confront my own racism and my prejudice ideology. So I thought I'd just have an honest conversation with you and break it down over a few parts and let you see into the mind of someone like me, the way I grew up and the man I'm becoming. Now here's the crazy thing. I've only ever known one racist in my life for sure, and that's me, because I can't speak into the hearts and minds of another human being and what they think and feel. That's not fair, and that's prejudicial of me. So I'm the only one I've ever known, so I feel I can speak with authority about this. I'm not calling out other people who are. This is simply about my evolution and the things I confronted and some of the difficulties and some of the beautiful parts of this. This is not an easy thing for me to do. This is kind of laying my soul bare. So if you would, let me know if this is something you want me to continue in the comments, please, because it's going to take a lot for me to invest emotionally to be open about this. Now, why is it I grew up with so much prejudice and bias and discrimination in my life? Well, I grew up in a small town in Arkansas, and I am Arkansas proud. Let me just say that right off the top. But I grew up with people who taught me these things, and it was instilled in me. I mean, it was just reinforced over and over. And then for the most part, I lived in an echo chamber of other people who thought the same thing. So I didn't know it was possible to think any other way. I was raised Christian. I cannot explain to you why my faith in God, my morality, and my racism took so long to cross paths. I can't explain it, but it probably took about 40 years to figure that out. There's a whole series of events in my life, I guess, ultimately that led up to this. And prison was probably one of the biggest catalysts, because when you're on 23-on-1 lockdown with someone of a different color from you in the same cell, you shut your mouth and you listen. You ask questions. And I had so many different cellmates from different countries, from different races and heritages. And it just really opened my mind. And sitting in prison, I had a lot of time to think. And I had some old timers tell me, I need to do my time. Don't let my time do me. And those are good words of advice. But I started digging deep into myself and my flaws, and because I was probably the biggest asshole I knew at that time, and I wasn't proud of that at all. And I knew I needed to change if I wanted to live a productive and healthy life and just be somebody likable. I just couldn't see the world for the way it really was. And that breaks my heart that it took me so long to see it. But the beauty that is born from this change in me, or this growth, is just crazy. God is amazing.
This is my last message addressed to the people of South Africa. To my dear wife and family, I will say goodbye in a different way. Our country faces so many challenges of a serious nature. I hold firm opinions about all of them, but decided to keep this message very short and only really focus on 2 issues. Therefore, let me today, in this last message, repeat: I, without qualification, apologize for the pain and the hurt and the indignity and the damage that apartheid has done to black, brown, and Indians in South Africa. I do so not only in my capacity as the former leader of the National Party, but also as an individual. My conversion, to which I refer, didn't end with the admission to myself of the total unacceptability of apartheid. It motivated us in the National Party to take the initiatives we took. From the time that I became leader of the National Party, and more specifically during my presidency. Together with most other South Africans, I'm proud of our Constitution. The Constitution which we hammered out in the negotiations which started in 1990 and which culminated in the final Constitution of 1996. I fully associate myself with the values and principles enshrined in our Constitution. And I'm deeply concerned about the undermining of many aspects of the Constitution, which we perceive almost day to day. The road forward is a difficult one, but I firmly believe that if we take hands, and if all the reasonable people in South Africa put their heads together, we can overcome the challenges we face, and we can fulfill the tremendous potential that South Africa has. May the South African nation show the courage and the ingenuity to achieve this.